Welcome back. Now, so far, every time we've tried to load information into the database, what we have been doing is that we've been typing the information and then we load that information into the database. But what if the information that you're trying to load is sitting on a file? How can you load that information into the database? So here, I have a file, okay, a CSV file called company safety, and it has some information that we want to load into the database. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can load information from a CSV file into a database. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do obviously is import the libraries that we need. So we need to import CSV since we are dealing with a CSV file here. So CSV is a Python built-in module that is used to interact with CSV files. And then we need to import SQLite 3 like that. So let's run this cell to make sure that everything has imported correctly. So everything is just fine. Now I'll put everything into a function. It's always a good idea to put your code in a function. It helps to keep your code organized. So let's define a function here called load safety data like that. And then we want to, obviously first thing is to establish connection to the database. So we create a variable here called con. Con will be SQLite 3 dot connect, and then we can give our database a name. Let's say safety data dot DB. So if this database already exists, this will just establish a connection to the database. But if it doesn't exist, this will create a new database for us. So now we need to create a cursor object. This is the object that we're going to use to interact with our database. So we'll create a variable here called cursor, and we'll say con.cursor. So these are the same steps that we used in the previous videos, like that. Okay. So now we use this cursor object to create the table in our database. So we'll say cursor.execute. So we pass the SQL query to the execute function. And let's create a string here. Remember, the query always has to be passed as a string. So we are going to pass the create table query here. So we'll say create table, and we want to create this table if it doesn't exist. So we'll say if node exists, like that. Okay, if node exists, and what is the name of the table? Let's give it safety. That's the name of the table. Now, inside this parenthesis, that's where we are going to put the features of our table. Okay, by features, I mean the columns and the data type that we want our table to hold. So if we go to our table here, how many columns does it have? It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. And the first column is employee ID. Okay, so we're going to add it here as the first column. Instead of calling it employee ID, I'll just call it ID. And this will be the primary key. Okay, and comma. And the next one is, we have employee name and department. So I'll just call this name, and the data type should be text. Okay, and comma. And then we have department. This will also be text data type. What else do we have in our table? We also have incident date. So incident date will be of date data type, comma, and we also have incident type, which will be text data type. And what else do we have here? We have days lost column, and this will be integer data type. Okay, and the last one will be injury severity, and we add it here, injury severity, like that. Okay, and this will be data type text, like that. Okay, so how many columns do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. Okay, now we want to make sure that our code is able to catch any errors that we're going to face aggressively. So we need to put our code in try and except blocks. So I'll put this, let's just tab this. Okay, we'll put this in a try block. Now that we've created our table here, the next thing that we need is to access the CSV file. Okay, so this is where we use this CSV module that we have here. We now need to read the CSV file. Okay, so we read the CSV file, then we get that data, and then we add it to our safety table here. So always a good idea to open files with the with statement. Okay, so we say with open. Okay, and let's give it a parameter here. Okay, let's just call this input data. Okay, so we'll pass the file here, the CSV file, as input data, and then we'll open it in R mode or small R mode, which is the read mode. We want to read this CSV file, and we'll give it a variable of CSV file like that. And then now we are going to use the CSV reader to read this file, and then we'll attach that to a variable called, let's just call this CSV reader. Okay, will be CSV dot reader function. Okay, so to the reader function, that's where we pass this CSV file like that. Okay, now when we load this information into the database, you may have noticed that the first row here has headings. So we don't want to load headings into our database because we have already created our headings here. Okay, so we need to skip the headings. So to skip the headings, we're going to use the next function. So we'll pass CSV reader to the next function. So this will skip the headers and go straight to row number 2. Now, to load this information into the database, we need to loop over this CSV reader that we have here. And then we will load the information into the table one row at a time. So we'll say for row in CSV reader. Okay. And now we need to insert this row into the table. So we are going to use the insert statement. So we'll say cursor dot execute, and then we'll use the insert statement here. We'll say insert into the name of the table, which is safety, and the values. So here we're going to use a parameterized query. So we need to pass placeholders for the 7 columns that we have here. And remember, we use the question marks. So say 1, we need to pass 7. So 1 here, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So these question marks should always match the number of columns that you have. If they don't match, then you are going to have an error. Okay. And then in each of these, we are going to insert a row. Okay. So the for loop will loop over this CSV reader, okay, which has information from our CSV file here. And then it will load that information into our table here, safety, one row at a time, like that. And now, once we load this information, we need to commit. Okay, so once we do that, we need to commit. So we say con dot commit. This is how you make the information permanent in your database. And let's say we want our function to print that, the information has been loaded successfully, to let us know data loaded successfully, like that. Okay, and now we can, since we've already added the try block here, we need to add the except block. So this will handle any errors that we may face. So SQLite 3.error as E, and we just want to print this error, print E. Okay, and then finally we can add the finally block. So the finally block will just close the connection to the database. So we'll say con dot close, like that. Okay, so this should be able to handle this task for us. It should be able to load the information into the database. So let's create a variable here called data, and we have to pass it the name of the file that we are getting the data from, the CSV file. So this file is company safety. So pass company safety here. So when we call this function now, we're going to pass data as an argument. So let's call this function and hope that everything will work just fine. The name of the function is load safety data, and then we'll pass it data as an argument. So first, let's check that we don't have any problems here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns, and here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 placeholders, and these values should be capital S here. Okay, so let's run this code and let's see what happens. Run this. There's an error near exists. The spelling is wrong. We need to add an S like that. Okay, so you see, that's the advantage of adding the except block. Okay, when such things happen, you just get warned and your code doesn't crash. So now let's run this code again. Okay, no such file as company safety. We forgot to add the extension, which is CSV. All right, now let's run it again. All right, so data loaded successfully. So we have loaded the data into our database, which is a great thing. So now to view this data, we need to create a connection to the database. Okay, so let's just copy this like that and add it here. Okay, we create the connection to the database because remember we have closed the connection here. So now we need to use the select statement to view this data. So let's create a variable here called results, and then we'll say cursor dot execute, and we'll use select. Okay, so we select everything from the name of the table, which is safety. And now once we get these results, we need to fetch these results. So we'll say, let's create another variable here so that we can be able to loop over these results. Let's say we say returned data will be results dot fetch. Oh, we need to fetch everything like that. And then we can just loop over this return data, and that will return all the rows that we have in our data. So we can say for row in returned data, we want to do what? We want to just print row. So this will give us the data that we have loaded into the database. So if we run this code here, see what we get. You can see that we get the rows of the data that we have loaded into the database. So this is how you load data into the database if that data is sitting on a CSV file. So basically, you need to create a table, and then you add the columns and the data type that each column is going to hold. Then you read the file using the CSV module. Okay, and then you loop over the file, and then the data is added using the insert into statement. Okay, so this is the data that we've added here. The first name is John Doe. If we go to our file here, you can see that we have John Doe. That's the first row that we have here, John Doe Manufacturing. So this is how you load information into the database. If we wanted to only see like maybe the first 5 rows, we can use the limit clause here and say limit the output to 5 rows. We'll run this. You can see now that we only get 5 rows. Okay, now how would you delete the table from the database? If you say I want to delete this table, how would you do that? So to delete the table, we use the drop table statement. Okay, so here we can say cursor dot execute. Okay, and then here you pass drop table, and then you pass it the name of the table that you want to drop here, like maybe drop safety, like that. So if you run this code here, this would delete the table from your database. Okay, so if you run it here, run this, you can see that it has run. So we no longer have this table in our database. If we try to run this cell here, it will now generate an error because this table doesn't exist. Let's run it. You see, we get an error, no such table, safety. Okay, so this is how you load data into the database using the CSV module if that data is sitting on a CSV file. See you in the next video.